July 20th, 1973. Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Hong Kong. On the dissection table, under the cold light of fluorescent lamps, lies the body of a man whose name makes fighters around the world tremble. He was only 32 years old. Official reports will tell you that the cause of death was cerebral edema, caused by an allergic reaction to a harmless headache pill. But when the pathologists made the first incision, what they saw made them freeze in bewilderment. This was not the body of an ordinary athlete. It was an anatomical anomaly that defied the laws of biological survival. Under skin as thin as parchment, there was practically no fat layer. We are not talking about a sports cut before a competition. We are talking about indicators close to zero, a state where the organism begins to devour itself just to keep the heart beating. You are used to seeing Bruce Lee as a smiling philosopher, a master who moved faster than thought. But this image is just a glossy cover. The truth, hidden in medical records and eyewitness accounts, paints a completely different picture. Bruce Lee was not just an athlete. He was the first biohacker in history, a man who began to hack his own body half a century before it became a trendy movement in Silicon Valley. But while modern biohackers use gentle methods under the supervision of doctors, Bruce operated in the blind spot of science, turning his body into a laboratory for experiments that any ethics committee today would call suicidal. Imagine a man so obsessed with efficiency that he considers chewing food a waste of time and energy. Every morning, the roar of an industrial blender echoed in his kitchen. Into this bowl flew not cheap fillers. Into it went protein powder, powdered milk, raw eggs, together with the shells for calcium, bananas, and vegetable oil. Sometimes he added meat juice, an extract from beef. He drank the resulting brown sludge in one gulp. It was fuel. High-octane, dirty, biologically hazardous fuel for a machine that had no right to stop. But even this was not enough for him. He wanted to find a way to train when he slept, when he ate, when he wrote scripts. And he found it in a technology that at the time was used only for the rehabilitation of severely wounded Soviet soldiers and paralyzed patients. In his house stood a machine that emitted a frightening electrical hum. Electrodes myostimulation. Bruce connected electrodes to his muscles and ran a high-voltage current through them. He sat reading a book while his body convulsed from electric shocks. According to his wife Linda, he turned the power regulator up to levels that made guests of the house look away in horror. He believed that 10 minutes under voltage replaced 10 hours in the gym. He literally fried his nerve endings, forcing muscles to contract with superhuman speed and density. It was torture raised to the rank of discipline. But what was he preparing himself for? Most people think he trained for the fight, that he wanted to be stronger than Chuck Norris or faster than Muhammad Ali. But if you look closer, you will understand that his main enemy was not a human. His enemy was human nature itself, the limitations of flesh and blood. He tried to squeeze functions out of his body that it was not designed for by evolution. And the scariest part of this story is not how he died, but how he lived in his final months. He created a body that looked like a perfect weapon, but from the inside it resembled an over-tightened string, ready to snap at the slightest vibration. Was he a genius who saw the future of fitness? Undoubtedly. But the price he paid for this knowledge turned out to be higher than anyone could have guessed. And right now, you must ask yourself a question. If you knew that these methods would gift you eternal glory, but burn you to the ground in a few years, would you decide to press the start button? Welcome to the golden era of bodybuilding. The 1970s, Venice Beach, California. It was a time of giants. Men like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno were turning themselves into mountains of meat, and the world looked at them with awe. Their philosophy was primitive, but effective. Lift the heaviest weights possible, eat everything not nailed to the floor, and sleep as long as possible. Success was measured exclusively in centimeters of bicep volume. If you weren't huge, you didn't exist in the fitness world. But in the shadow of these titans stood a man who weighed barely 60 kilograms, yet possessed a physical density that frightened even Mr. Olympia champions. Bruce Lee did not want to be a mountain. He looked at these bodybuilders and saw in them not athletes, but prisoners of their own mass. He called their muscles decorative, devoid of the explosive functionality required for real survival. While they were building statues, he was building a weapon. But why did he choose this path, going against all the trends of that time? Bruce realized a truth that sports science would only accept 40 years later. Size is not strength. True power lies in the neuromuscular connection, in the brain's ability to instantly recruit every fiber. He didn't want the body of a tank. He wanted the body of a compressed spring under monstrous tension. To achieve this, he had to declare war on the very concept of comfort. And this war began in the kitchen, but not at all how you might imagine. Forget about the balanced keto diets or vegan smoothies we see today on Instagram. Bruce's approach to nutrition was on the verge of psychotic efficiency. He viewed his stomach not as an organ for deriving pleasure from food, but as a fuel tank for a high-revving engine. Witnesses recalled walking into his kitchen and hearing the deafening screech of a blender, grinding something that, by the laws of nature, should remain solid. He took protein ingredients, lecithin, inositol, and threw them into the pitcher. Then came raw eggs, not just whites or yolks, but often whole eggs, shell and all. Bruce believed that the calcium from the shell was vital for densifying bones so they wouldn't shatter from the force of his own strikes. To somehow mask the nauseating taste of the mixture and the lime grit, he added vegetable oil or peanut butter, turning it all into a thick gray sludge. You wouldn't be able to take a single sip without fighting the gag reflex. Bruce drank it in one go, but the cocktail was just the foundation. Lee was one of the first athletes to dive headfirst into the unregulated wild world of biosupplements. He consumed vitamins in quantities that doctors of the time considered useless or even toxic. Ginseng, royal jelly, granular lecithin. He swallowed pills by the handful, seeking that chemical advantage which nature had forgotten to put in him. He treated his biology like an open-source operating system that could be rewritten. Feeling sluggish? There's a pill. Need recovery? There's a mixture. He tried to engineer a state of eternal peak performance. However, this obsession with purity and efficiency had a dark side that no one noticed behind his speed. By burning every gram of fat and revving his metabolism to the limit, he was walking on a razor's edge. He wasn't just becoming lean, he was becoming transparent. His skin became thin as paper. Through it, one could study anatomy as if from a textbook. To the camera, he looked like a god, but physiologically, his organism was screaming for help. He removed all the fuses that protect the body from exhaustion, and while the world admired him, asking, how does he move so fast? The real question should have been, how long can a human engine run at 10,000 RPM before the pistons fly out through the hood? Bruce Lee was sure he controlled the chaos inside himself, but he was mistaken. He was racing toward a physical limit, followed by inevitable catastrophe. We look at photos of Bruce Lee and see abs that resemble a washboard or a piece of corrugated steel. But most people don't understand that behind this aesthetics lay a function bordering on self-torture. Bruce invented a movement that physical therapists of the time called anatomical suicide, the dragon flag. Imagine lying on a bench, holding the edge with your hands behind your head, and then raising your entire body into a vertical candle, resting only on your shoulder blades. And the scariest part, you begin to slowly, agonizingly slowly, lower your straight legs and torso down, hovering a centimeter off the bench. At this moment, gravity tries to break your spine in half, and the only thing keeping you from a fracture is the monstrous tension of your core muscles. This exercise tears the fibers of an unprepared person. Bruce did this exercise in sets, with a smile on his face. He created a corset of muscle capable of withstanding a direct hit from a sledgehammer. But even this seemed insufficient to him. His obsession with efficiency led him to a thought that sounds like the beginning of a sci-fi horror. What if one could train without moving? What if you could force muscles to work while you write a script, read a book, or watch TV? In the early 70s, he stumbled upon an experimental technology used in closed sports labs of the Eastern Bloc and clinics for rehabilitating the paralyzed. EMS, electromyostimulation. An ordinary person uses EMS for light massage or recovery. Bruce used it as an electric chair for his muscles. He would put on a belt with electrodes, sit at his desk, and turn the voltage knob. Witnesses who visited his home described an eerie scene. Bruce calmly talking on the phone, discussing the filming of a new movie, while his body under his clothes jerked in rhythmic, unnatural convulsions. He cranked the voltage to a level that gave other people panic attacks. He claimed that 10 minutes under current equaled 10 hours of grueling work in the gym. He was literally hacking his nervous system, sending contraction signals directly into the fibers, bypassing brain fatigue. He considered himself invulnerable. He believed he had rewritten the laws of physiology, but biology has hard limits. And on August 13th, 1970, Bruce crashed into this wall at full speed. It didn't happen in a fight with a kung fu master or on a movie set. It happened in the backyard of his house during a routine good morning exercise. He placed a barbell weighing 60 kilograms, equal to his own weight, on his shoulders and began leaning forward. Suddenly a sound rang out, like the snapping of a dry branch, a loud, sickening crunch. Bruce collapsed onto the grass. The pain was as if a red-hot crowbar had been driven into his back. The doctor's diagnosis sounded like a sentence: damage to the fifth lumbar vertebra and severe trauma to the sacral ligaments. Medical luminaries told him to his face, "Mr. Lee, you will never kick again. If you are lucky, you will be able to walk, but forget about kung fu." For a man whose life was built on movement, this was worse than death. He ended up bedridden for 6 months, staring at the ceiling and feeling his great body turning into a prison. But it was in this darkness, in this immobility, that something inside him broke completely. And we aren't talking about his spine. His fuse of fear broke. Bruce did not accept the diagnosis. He began studying anatomy with the obsession of a maniac, drawing diagrams of muscles and nerves. He decided that if he couldn't train with force, he would train with will. And when he got out of bed, against all predictions, he was different. He returned, not just recovered. He returned angry, lean and fast as a cobra. But to maintain this new form with a ruined back, he required something more than just will. He required chemistry. And this became the beginning of the end. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. About that dirty secret that martial arts fans are afraid to discuss even in a whisper, so as not to destroy the icon. We are used to thinking of Bruce Lee as a deity of health, a man who reached the peak solely through discipline and Zen philosophy. But what if the foundation of this temple was mixed with dangerous chemistry? We know the facts from the toxicological report, and they are ruthless. Traces of cannabis were found in his blood, but modern researchers are convinced he also used diuretics. Ask yourself, why would a martial arts master, whose goal is functional strength and endurance, take drugs that bodybuilders use before stepping on stage to dehydrate the body to the state of a mummy? Bruce was obsessed not just with leanness, he was chasing an unnatural, anatomical transparency. He wanted his skin to resemble oiled parchment, stretched directly over steel cables of muscle. But diuretics are not just diet pills. They wash out electrolytes, potassium and magnesium, which make your heart beat. Taking them against the backdrop of monstrous loads and fluid loss, he was playing Russian roulette with a fully loaded cylinder. But if diuretics were the gun, then who gave him the bullets? Tom Bleecker, Linda Lee's second husband, a man who gained access to the family's personal archives, made a statement that split the community in two. He claimed he found direct evidence of anabolic steroid use. In the early 70s, this was not yet considered a crime or cheating. It was considered cutting-edge science. Look at Bruce's symptoms in the last 2 years of his life. Sudden, frightening outbursts of uncontrolled rage from which assistants on set hid. Unnatural vascularity and muscle density that scared makeup artists. And most importantly, that very miraculous recovery from the back injury which doctors called impossible. Medicine said, "You are an invalid." Chemistry answered, "You are a superhuman." And there was one more needle we know about for sure, without any conspiracy theories. Cortisone. After that fatal good morning with the barbell, the back pain didn't go anywhere. It just lurked like a predator in the dark. Bruce didn't treat the spine. He silenced the screams of his body with direct injections of cortisone into the spinal column. This allowed him to jump, hit, and act in movies, but it was the greatest illusion. Cortisone turned off the pain, but accelerated tissue destruction. He was flying down the Autobahn at 200 kilometers per hour in a car with the low oil light on, but instead of stopping, he simply smashed the bulb with a hammer so it wouldn't blind his eyes. The culmination of this race with death happened not on July 20th, but 2 months earlier, May 10th, 1973. Bruce was at the Golden Harvest studio, dubbing a film. The room was stuffy. The air conditioners were turned off so the noise wouldn't interfere with the recording. Suddenly, Bruce began to lose touch with reality. He went to the restroom to wash his face and collapsed on the floor. His body convulsed, foam coming from his mouth. It was a dress rehearsal for his death. Doctors performed a miracle that day. They administered mannitol, reduced the brain swelling, and pulled him back from the other side. Bruce opened his eyes, saw his wife, and smiled. He decided he had won. But he didn't understand the main thing. Why did he overheat in a room where others were simply sweating? The answer will shock you with its absurdity. Bruce Lee had surgically removed his sweat glands in the armpit area. He believed that large wet spots on screen looked unappealing. Think about this madness. A man who trained with the intensity of a nuclear reactor voluntarily broke his own organism's cooling system for the sake of a pretty picture. On that day, May 10th, his internal engine boiled over, and the body had nowhere to dump the heat. He cooked from the inside. Fate gave him the loudest warning shot in history. Stop, or you will die. But Bruce Lee didn't know where the brake pedal was. He only knew the gas. The official cause of death sounds like a cruel, unfunny joke of cosmic scale. Cerebral edema, an allergic reaction to a microscopic component of equagesic, a banal headache pill that millions of housewives swallow without even washing it down with water. The world accepted this version because it is convenient. It is tragic, but accidental. But let's cast aside the convenient lie and look the truth in the eye. The pill was not the killer. It was merely the feather that broke the camel's back. Bruce Lee did not die from medicine. He died from his own philosophy, which did not provide for the right to weakness. Recall the sound of the blender we started with. That nauseating cocktail of a mixture of supplements, eggs, and shells. It was not just a diet. It was a metaphor for his entire life. Bruce Lee methodically, year after year, dismantled his body for parts, like a mechanic strips a stock car, and ruthlessly threw away everything he considered excess. He threw away fat, the organism's main strategic energy reserve. He threw away water, the main thermoregulator and conductor of life. He threw away rest, the only evolutionary mechanism for recovery. He even cut out his sweat glands, physically depriving himself of a cooling system. He turned himself into a Formula One bolide, stripped of brakes, airbags, roll cage, and bumpers to maximize weight reduction for the sake of insane, inhuman speed. Such a car indeed drives faster than everyone else. It sets records that are impossible to beat and enters corners at angles that violate the laws of physics. But such a car has a fatal flaw. It falls apart at the first bump. That very bump was a headache on a hot July day. His organism, exhausted by probable diuretic use, tormented by electric current, stimulants, and training to the point of failure, simply did not have a single gram of resource to cope with a banal chemical compound. He had no buffer. He was a crystal cannon, colossal stopping power, and zero durability. He tried to cheat the equation of thermodynamics, but nature always collects its due, and the interest on this loan turned out to be incompatible with life. Bruce Lee is not just a sports icon, a movie star, or a philosopher. He is the loudest, brightest warning in the history of human physiology. He proved to the whole world that a human can go beyond their biological settings. He truly hacked the genetic code, becoming faster than our anatomy allows. But he didn't have time to leave us instructions on how to survive this hack. We rewatch his movies, see his perfect abs, and think of immortality. But if we look into the dry lines of medical reports, we will see a man who burned alive because he poured aviation fuel into his engine. And now, knowing the full price of this greatness, knowing about the pain, the electric shock, the life on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and death at 32, I want you to answer one question. Who was he really? Was he the greatest visionary, an architect of the human body, who simply made a tragic mistake in his calculations? Or was he a fanatical madman whose giant ego destroyed him faster than any opponent in the ring? Is eternity in legends worth those 50 years he stole from himself? Write your verdict in the comments. I need to know whose side you are on in this battle of man versus nature.